So in today's video, we're going to be talking about if goats and emus can live together. Here on the farm, we have 2 emus and about 25 goats, 20 to 25, it varies. We birth here, so the goats currently, some of them are pregnant, and we have babies a couple times a year. So one of the main things that's gonna be important to know about the emus is their upbringing and their temperament. Because they need to be friendly with the goats and not be chasing them around. Emus have giant feet with giant nails, so if they wanted to, they could definitely hurt a goat or stomp on a goat. So I think that it's important, if you decide to keep goats and emus together, that you get the emus as babies or have them to where they are already socialized with these critters. And especially goats, if your goats have horns, they could also hurt the emu's legs. So it depends. Was the goat raised with emus? How is the goat's temperament? Because if emus get a leg injury, that is basically a death sentence for them. Their legs can splay and they can have trouble walking, and you may even have to euthanize the emu. So the 2 most important things is how they act around each other and how they were socialized to one another, especially at a young age. Right here, this is our female emu, Kitty, and our emus are actually wonderful livestock guardians and protectors for the goats. So they can seriously injure or hurt coyotes, dogs, or anything else that gets into the pen. They have those instincts to be able to protect. They are not prey animals, emus, and they take their job very seriously. We have never lost a goat since having emus in our pen, and one time when a neighbor's dog got into our goat pen, they actually knocked it out. So they are very effective livestock guardians for our goats. If our goats were to get aggressive with our emus, or if our emus were to get aggressive with our goats, we would not keep them together. We would separate them immediately. But as far as things go right now, they peacefully coexist very well. Very sweet and friendly, especially since they've been very socialized from a young age. And they get along perfectly with our goats. At nighttime, the goats cuddle up in the emu's feathers. And our goats are pretty respectful too. They do not chew on the emu's feathers, and they just overall get along really well. If there was any unsafe behavior going on, such as headbutting from the goats, biting, or if the emus were chasing the goats, stressing them out, pecking them too much, kicking, anything of the sort, they would be separated immediately. But they respect each other very well, and they even lay together, and they are quite good friends. Young baby goats even jump on the emus' backs when they are young, and the emus do not care at all. They are very good with the baby goats, and they have never ever hurt one of our goats. There's a close-up of the emu's feet. If they were not social animals, if they were aggressive in any way, they could even harm a human. So we do make sure that we keep their behavior in check and that there's no threat with them being here on the farm. Look at how big those feet are. They could definitely kick with a lot of power, or even cut you deep enough that you may need stitches if you were to have an aggressive emu around. Another very important thing for keeping goats and emus together is a proper feeding setup. They have very different diets. Emus need very, very high protein, and they often need meat, like cat food and dog food. They are mostly carnivores or omnivores, while goats are herbivores and they do not get any type of meat at all. And certain foods can definitely hurt the goat's stomach and even make them bloat. So for our emus, we have this up-high feeder for the trees, and the goats can definitely not reach that. So we feed the emus in here, and they get their food to where the goats cannot reach it at all. So the most important thing, or one of the very most important things, is having the correct feeding setup. If these goats had 24/7 access to emu food, they could definitely get sick, and the emus may not even be getting what they need. Goats are definitely greedy little things, so if they had access to emu food with the chicken scratch and cat food and rabbit food, all things they cannot have but the emus need, they would make themselves sick on it. So if you ever decide to keep goats and emus together, it is very, very important that you have a good feeder for your emus and a way to keep the goats out of the food. They just have their coastal hay, and they also occasionally get grain like alfalfa, a 16% medicated goat feed, and stuff like that, which is not harmful to the emus, but as long as their feeder is full, they stay out of the goat's food, which is good, and hay would not hurt the emus either, so it's more so the emu food can be dangerous for the goats, not the goat feed being dangerous for the emus. But if you ever do get a feed for your goats that is not safe for your emus, you need to find a way to feed your goats and your emus completely separately. Another thing is that emus absolutely love water. In the wild, they love to go swimming in anything they can find. So the emus, especially when it's hot out, they like to sit in the troughs and make the water all dirty. So you'd have to make sure that you have the time to occasionally rinse it out or keep separate waterers for the goats and the emus, because I do not want my goats drinking filthy, muddy water all the time. And the emus can definitely make that hard in the summer, so that is another thing to think about if you were to have them together. So it might be best to get the emus a little pool for their own, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stay out of the water troughs or the buckets. Another important thing to think about is shelter. I have a big pallet barn for my goats that the emus and the goats can both live in. It's tall enough for both of them. But if you were to have just something like these IBC totes for your goats, your emus may not know how to get in, or it might not even be tall enough or big enough or spacious enough for them to live in. So it's important that you have enough room to house all of them, or separate shelters for them, for the emus to go into one and the goats to go into another. Here's my temporary pallet goat barn. It's not the prettiest, but it keeps my goats warm and out of the elements. So as you can tell, even I can fit in here, but the emu can duck their head down and get in, and if you go up here, it's more than tall enough for an emu. So all the goats and the emus can fit in here together, and there's another compartment over here with another door, so they can all fit in here and not all have to be cramped. Another key thing to think about is fencing. Is your fencing tall enough to keep goats in and emus in, or is there a risk of them jumping out? So our goats, they stay in this. It is almost 5 feet. I know technically some goats can jump it and emus could jump it, but it also depends on the stress factors that you have. Our animals, they are well fed and very content, so they don't really try to jump out. But it would be important to have something tall enough, or maybe another fence farther back, so if they escape one pen, they are still contained. And our emus don't really jump. They don't really have a reason to jump. People need 6-foot fences for their goats, or 6-foot fences for their emus. I know some goats can jump super high. Luckily, ours do not. The size of the wire holes, you do not want something that your goats will get their horns stuck in, and you do not want something that your emus will get their heads stuck in. The emus can stick their heads through here, and their heads do not get stuck. They have really skinny necks and skinny heads. They'll just go through, and the goats' heads are too big to get stuck in here. So luckily, this size works really well for us. So if you happen to have a mating pair or multiple mating pairs of emus, and they're laying eggs and sitting on nests, you're gonna wanna make sure that the goats don't have access to that, because the goats can get in there and they can crush up the eggs. It's really not safe, especially if your female emu is hatching out the babies. You do not want a goat to crush an egg with a live baby emu in there. So it's important that if that's what you have going on, to make sure the goats don't have access to the female in her nest. So there's a lot of things that go into keeping goats and emus together, but the most important thing is how your setup is like, how your fence is like, if you have a way to keep the diet separate. And as long as you can meet all those requirements and they're living peacefully, it is okay and can even be beneficial to have them together. Anything the emus like to do to the goats, since they have those long pointy beaks, they like bugs and all kinds of stuff. So if there's a little bug crawling on the goat's back, or a piece of hay or a piece of dirt, they will pick them off the goats. So it's a little symbiotic relationship there. If you're facing the decision to have emus in with your goats, I really hope that these are some things that you can think about and make a decision about, and I hope it works out for you just as it has for me. Thank you for watching.